Hey, welcome to the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim, and we are continuing our series here, just taking a look back at 2024. And we cannot do that without talking about the Fighting Illini. And I have our good friend of the show, Sonny Verma from Lockdown Illini. Sonny, thanks for being here. How you doing this morning?
I'm doing fantastic, Zach. Thank you so much for the invite. Obviously, I'm a big fan of the huddle. You know, yours and JR's, and every now and then Kent have a fantastic point. And you are my go-to show when it comes just to covering the Big Ten Conference. So when I saw that invite, I couldn't wait to come on.
Yeah, well, we're excited to have you, and I appreciate when you pop on. You know, we're talking pre-show. I especially like it when you can give Kent just a little bit of a reality check because he kind of needs it sometimes. Kent, we love you. We love you. Kent, it's funny. I haven't actually gotten to talk with Kent in a while, so he's often asked about by our listeners. It's like, where's the casual? And he's like, he'll be back. Don't worry, he'll be here. So,
but, he's around.
Yeah. Well, Sonny, it was a heck of a season for the Illini. So we're just going to jump right in. I remember talking with several folks preseason, like what's the barometer of success for the Illini? And many of them would say a bowl game. Mm-hmm. When did you start to think that maybe it could be more than that?
Just the fact that our losses weren't really big losses, right? Like even when we played against the game against Penn State, Penn State, I believe, was top 5 in the country. We were going to Happy Valley, and that was a game that was within a score with 2 minutes left. Mm-hmm. And, that's when it kind of showed me that, when you talk about the prototypical Brett Bielema football team, we're there. This is what Illinois is right now. Again, Oregon was a blowout a couple weeks later, but Oregon is arguably the second or third best team in the country last year. So on that, the way they performed against Penn State, where they were dominated. I'm not going to lie, like the box score isn't quite as drastic as what the on play field was, but what it showed me was Brett knows how to coach football. And while we may not have the 4 and 5 stars that other programs have, everyone that suits up in the blue and orange, they're going to max out on the talent that they do have. And so I think Penn State was a good barometer for me, showing, hey, you know what, this team might be a little bit better than just 6 wins.
Yeah, for sure. And they were coming in, I mean, undefeated. I remember, so I covered Penn State the week before. I was actually in the press box, and I remember thinking, wow, like Penn State looks really good. James Franklin comes into the post-game press conference, and he's like, we need whiteout energy, which is so awkward. Right. It was so awkward. It's like, and I like James Franklin, and I like Penn State, but he was we need whiteout energy, and like that long pause, and you're like, but you knew he was taking Illinois very, very seriously. And they needed to, because I think the Illini, while they were dominated, they kept it close just with grit. And I think it showed the character of their team. I think a lot of people will talk about Luke Altmaier, and we'll get to him in a minute. But how did they get these guys to play so well so early? Because I think that was a big question. Is you had a lot of new players, a lot of questions about the defense, especially with Ryan Walters, his second year being away from the program. Like, how did that all come together?
It's trust. It's family. I mean, that's not just the motto of this football team. It's, hashtag FAMILLY. If you listen to recruits on campus visits and when they leave, the number one thing that they tout is that they're not kidding with that family moniker. Brett Bielema is constantly talking about how important relationships are built, in the simple hello that you give someone walking through the door and the goodbye that you give when they walk out the door. And I think, it's one of those where the players, the parents, they trust Brett Bielema. And look, he's got a track record, right? Like now that Saban is gone, no one has developed more offensive linemen to the NFL than Brett. And right now, Illinois itself, a team that went like 3 or 4 years without sending one guy to the NFL draft. Now, all of a sudden, last year we had a couple, the year before we had a couple. Every year we're just cycling through Illinois town. This year we're only going to have one, Pat Bryant, and that's only because all the other guys are coming back. Next year, we expect a lot of them to be in the NFL draft. And, it's just one of those where you come to Illinois and you could be a 3-star. And, Illinois may very well only be your only high power 2 offer. But the way Brett's going to talk to you and the way the other coaches are going to talk to you, they're going to make you believe in yourself. And you're going to see the track record of, hey, if you listen, those guys listen to these coaches and now they're playing on Sundays. I'm going to do the same. They already have a chip on their shoulder because they weren't recruited by the Michigans or the Ohio States. So when they go up against the Michigan, and it's CBS, the Red Grange Day, all that kind of stuff, they're hyped. They're ready to go. And they truly do think that they're going to win that game. And that all starts with Brett.
Well, and speaking of Brett, Illinois has had like big name coaches. I mean, Lovie Smith, right? I know when he got first hired at Illinois, I was thinking, this is a big time hire, former Super Bowl coach. Didn't win the Super Bowl, but was in the Super Bowl, good track record, and he had a couple of good big marquee wins, right? The upset Illinois 2019, like really big win for Illinois, but it never really culminated into maybe the success that people thought that Illinois could get to. What has been the difference with Brett Bielema? It sounds like culture has been one of them, but take us through more. Why has he been different than some of these other coaches that have come through Illinois?
I mean, again, it all starts with Brett. He's grateful for the opportunity he has, right? In his previous run in the Big Ten, with Wisconsin, he had a lot of success very early in his career. And, there's a lot of, even if you talk to Badgers fans now, say that a lot of it may have gone to his head a little bit. And obviously he moved on from Wisconsin, went to the SEC. And I think he was humbled a little bit by that experience. And, knowing that, hey, yeah, he took one of the toughest jobs in the entire country. Arkansas dealing in the SEC against those prime Alabama every single year. Yeah, that's going to be a tough job. But, obviously it didn't work out. He was let go. Then I think he just spent 2-3 years kind of reflecting and realizing, hey, I'm a football coach. I know I want to be a football coach. There's hopefully going to be an opportunity sometime, somewhere. But in the meantime, he coached under, he was an analyst with Bill Belichick. He worked with some of the geniuses of the game. And in that time, he built his Rolodex. He took down notes. And again, even before he took this job, before he met with Bill Belichick and learned under his wing, he was a fantastic football coach. He's proven it in this Big Ten conference. But when the Illinois job opened up, I think he saw it much more positively than a lot of us, and I mean us fans, even look at it. He really looked at it as a golden opportunity. He grew up in Illinois. Obviously, he went to school at Iowa, but he grew up in Illinois. And, returned to the Big Ten Conference. He really embraced, and in my opinion, he's really looked at this opportunity as the opportunity where he's going to spend the rest of his career at. So having said that, he knows how to build a program. Lovie Smith, the greatest Chicago Bears coach of my life, and in my opinion, the worst Illinois coach by the time he was done. Simply because he was checked out. It's different when you've already made millions upon millions of dollars at a higher level, coaching in the NFL. At first, when you come to college, sure, you might have that initial jolt of excitement, dealing with teenagers and whatnot. But if you take a look at Lovie's last 2 years at Illinois, we didn't have any top 25 Illini kids sign up for Illinois. And Illinois is not a national program. You're going to need to recruit local guys to build the foundation of what your football team is going to look like. And it tells you a lot. When Brett Bielema was hired, that a very prominent Northern Chicago high school coach who coaches one of the best teams in Chicagoland, he said that Lovie hadn't even stepped foot on campus in, I believe, like the last 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And that just shows you how mentally checked out Lovie was. Brett, as soon as he was hired, made a big deal about how many phone calls he had to make and how important it was for Illinois to rebuild and establish those relationships with the high school coaches all across the state. And now we're in the conversations. We're having, the top player in the state come visit for, recruiting weekends and whatnot. And again, it builds up the perception of what this program is. And let's be honest, we've been relatively successful over the last 4 or 5 seasons now since he's taken over. So a lot of these kids, or the previous generations, used to seeing Illinois win 3-4 games and just being at the bottom tier of the Big Ten. Now Brett has Illinois, winning 8 games. Last year was 10 games. It's Illinois is becoming a program that's going to be reckoned with in the Big Ten Conference, and it's all because of he really loves his job and he embraces the job he has at Illinois.
Yeah. Well, and to that point, I'm just looking up a quick look of 2026 recruiting for Illinois, 6th overall in the 247 composite.
Yeah.
I mean, when's the last time that Illinois was in the top 10 in recruiting?
Yeah. I mean, that's obviously clearly not going to last once the other programs start rolling. But, at Illinois, we would be jumping up as high as we can if we finish top 35 in recruiting rankings. But if you take a look at where we stand now, and also where we kind of stand with a couple other 4-stars who I'm feeling pretty confident that it might sign up with the orange and blue next year, this could very well be a top 25 class for Illinois. Yeah. And again, for Illinois, that is incredible. I don't have the stat off the top of my head, but I wonder how far back you have to go for Illinois to kind of pull that off. And it's not just again, I'm going to try to be respectful. It's not like empty star rankings like you had with Ron Zook, right? With Ron Zook, he was a fantastic recruiter. Loxley, a fantastic recruiter. They brought in the top high-end talent, but it never really developed when it was here. Like, they weren't exactly good football coaches. Brett Bielema is the opposite, and that's why I'm so excited about this season. And I know we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but we've seen what Brett can do with the cast-offs, with the 3-star players, with the development players. I'm really excited as a guy who covers the Illini to see what Brett does when he has more playmakers in his arsenal, when he has more 4-stars all of a sudden on his side of the football. I like where this could go.
Yeah. Well, and in a lot of ways, we've seen where it can go when he was the head man at Wisconsin, right? Like he developed, he had good recruiting. I love the little shade that you just threw at Mike Loxley. We are we're all fans of the Fire Loxley train here on the Big Ten Huddle. So empty star ratings, not developing. One of those guys, Victor Singleton, who's a top 60 recruit. You go into Ohio, which of course you never know. Like the way Ohio State recruits, you're never sure. Like did we really want it? Which I hate. I kind of hate that whenever that happens. It's like, even as a Buckeye fan, I'm like, come on, he's the 5th best corner in the country. Like, everybody wants this guy. Like that feels like it signals a shift, even in that, because of the reputation you guys have now with Brett, you guys can go and get guys from other states. Yes, still Midwest, but you're going into Ohio and you're swiping the 5th best corner in the country, according to 247. And you're doing that off the backs of a top 20 finish in the polls, a 10-win season, a big win over the vaunted SEC. I think Shane Beamer's still crying about something because of that. Like, you're just seeing the momentum being built, and I think it's really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it's Ohio, but it's also the state of Florida. Brett Bielema is really building a solid foundation out of Florida. A lot of the top talent that we're getting is from that state, and that's why it was such a big deal to have that game, the bowl game in Florida, because I think like 20 guys on our roster got to have their families come and watch that bowl game, and Brett again made a mention of that because he understands relationships. He understands, what that can mean. And so, the Singleton recruitment's an interesting one because, it surprised a lot of people, when he picked Illinois. And, there's always going to be that talk like he's not going to stick around. And whether he does or not, who knows? Like, as of this recording, none of us, you or I, know whether that's going to stick or not. But it gives another idea of what Brett Bielema is doing well. Yeah. And because he's so respected in this industry, there's a lot of young coaches who can't wait to work with him. And in this case, Corey Parker was one of them. He was the DB coach, I believe, or I may have mixed my assistant coach name up. He was the assistant coach at Toledo. I swapped the names wrong. He was an assistant coach at Toledo. And so he was a first offer for Singleton. And so he got hired by Brett Bielema to go to Illinois. But the relationship was already there with Singleton and that assistant coach. And so they just continued to build it in Champaign. And, ultimately, yeah, I knew we were a serious contender for Singleton. But even I'll admit, I was driving when I got that commit text. And I was genuinely shocked. But but at the same time, if Brett would tell you, don't be shocked. Whatever. And this is one of my favorite things about Brett Bielema is, he's gotten pretty famous on Twitter, right? Like, he has no problems trying to make what some people consider clickbaity comments or defending Illinois or the program. And I understand why, because he talks about it like, this is not yesterday's Illinois. He's like, if everyone wants to continue to live like this is yesterday's Illinois, then there's no job he can do to ever get us out of it. So what he wants to do is have Illinois in the modern day, conversation be talked about as, a potential college football playoff contender. He's like, last year, think about it. Brett Bielema constantly talking about, hey, Illinois should be in the conversation. Illinois should be in the conversation. Realistically speaking, there's other teams who have better resumes who can probably be a little bit ahead of Illinois. But what was the purpose of that? Brett Bielema's thinking long term.
Yep.
Last year, he had people talking about Illinois. This year, when we were returning 16 starters from last year's team, 18 from the bowl game, this year, if we win 10 games, it won't be here's the upstart Illinois team, should they get in. It'll just be like, oh, here's Illinois once again, back-to-back 10 win seasons. Maybe they should legitimately be, part of this discussion. And I think that's his goal. He just wants to change the mindset of not just the fans, but of the national media, the national fans, and get that perception of what you thought you knew about Illinois football. It's different. I'm here now.
Yeah. And you're starting to see that respect, even like I think Ari and what's the other guy's name that he's with? Ari and Andy on On3. I think they had Illinois maybe in the top 15 or top 10 of their preseason. I think they had an original top 25 and they were like way low and there was outrage. They're like, why are you sleeping on Illinois? And then they were like, oh yeah, you're right. We shouldn't sleep on them. Look at who they're returning. So
exactly.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, let's take a quick break here and then we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit more about continue to break down what happened this past season, but also start looking a little bit to the future. So we'll be back in about 30 seconds.
Homefield is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Homefield brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Homefield digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description.
Back on the Big Ten Huddle with Sonny Verma of Locked On Illini. Sonny, where can we find you on socials?
Yeah, before we get started with that, it is Corey Parker. I was confusing myself. I'm in such a basketball mode right now. I was like, did I say the wrong assistant coach? No, it was Corey Parker who built a relationship with Victor Singleton, and now that he's in Champaign, that relationship continued. I had to double check that during the break just because it was eating away at me. Zach, thank you again. Locked On Illini, daily content every single day. I'm only supposed to do this once a day on the weekdays, but for some really dumb reason, I made myself a pact at the new year that I'm going to produce content every day, and that includes the weekends.
Mm.
And so right now, we're almost halfway through March, and each and every day, if you log into my channel, if you're interested in Illini content at all, you can find me there. Otherwise, you can find me at the Sunny V on the social medias, and just Locked On Illini on all the other social medias.
Yeah, and you're on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, like all
everything. Yeah, you can find me on everything. Just do a quick search for Locked On Illini, and again, find us on the social media and just pop in and say hello, because I always like to go back and forth. Oh, there's also a Discord, a very big community. Zach, I'll send you a link later to possibly put in the description. We've got one of the biggest Illini Discords out there now. It's just us. We're all spread out all over the country, and it's just a nice having one place to just kind of banter back and forth with other Illini fans, as opposed to your uncle who doesn't care.
Sounds good. Yeah, definitely. Send that to me and JR, and we'll make sure it gets put in the chat. So, well, we're excited to have you here, and obviously the Illini. I think we can't say it enough. What a season they had! 10-3, ranked 16th, and honestly, probably should have been talked about a little bit more for the playoff. One of the big keys to that was Luke Altmaier, who I think for many people was kind of just a forgotten man at the start of the season. He was it Paddock was the other quarterback?
John Paddock.
John Paddock, who had come in relief because Altmaier got hurt. And I think a lot of people were kind of down. I think JR and I we were like, we think Altmaier's better than people think. And we felt very good about how he proved us right. But what did you see as an Illini guy? What did you see out of him and his growth as a quarterback and as a leader this past year?
I had a really good feeling about Luke, and I defended him on all the offseason shows last offseason because, the national narrative was, Luke went down against Minnesota, and then John Paddock came in, had that game-winning drive, and then the very next week against Indiana, he threw for like 500 plus yards. And, of course, there's going to be a lot of positive buzz, and, especially, Illinois is not exactly known as a, quarterback haven like that. And so when you break records at Illinois, it's not, that much of a, something to brag about. But Brett Bielema made the decision at that point to stick with John Paddock. And a lot of us kind of had our eyes on Luke Altmaier. How is he going to take this? He is a former 4-star. He didn't come to Illinois to sit on the bench.
Right.
And then, John Paddock finished the season, and then we were kind of waiting and seeing what's Luke going to do. But in every interview I watched with the coaching staff, and even John Paddock himself, he talked about how Luke took the benching in stride. He understood the reasoning behind it. He knew John at that point had the hot hand, and it's just really hard to bench a guy who just threw for a school record 500 plus yards in a victory. And John talked about how Luke loved learning from him. Hey, why did you do this? What made you so confident to make this decision a split second early, which is what Luke's fault was last year. He just happened to hold on to the football like a split second too long. And so John Paddock, that particular season, was actually the number one in the Big Ten Conference of just releasing that football. And so that was like the perfect guy to kind of learn from. Hey, what are you doing differently than I am? I'm younger than you. What can I kind of learn? He stuck around, and what was kind of a sign to me was the staff really didn't go out and look for another quarterback. And again, Brett Bielema knows football, and he knows, like, to me, if Brett Bielema, if Barry Lenny Jr. didn't feel the need to go out and find another guy just in case, then I have no reason to be concerned. Then, they see enough in practice, they believe enough in Luke Altmaier's ability to grow that they're confident that Luke is going to be the quarterback here, and that he's going to be a good quarterback here. And so, it's funny, like, now Luke doesn't have the detractors that he did last year. Now, I think he's a top 3, top 4, if not higher coach or quarterback in the Big Ten Conference. But it's just one of those, we're all a little bit on edge to see if he would come back, just because, a senior quarterback at this level in this day and age, it's almost like a college football cheat code. And so, he's being offered a lot of money by other programs who, have more money. But Luke ultimately, I think he likes it in Champaign. I think he's comfortable in Champaign. I think he and Barry Lunny Jr. just work really well together, and they have a very good mutual understanding of each other. So when he made that announcement that he was going to come back for a senior year, I believe he did it at a basketball game. A lot of us were really relieved.
Yeah. Well, and you just said, and I wanted to ask you this question. You kind of beat me to the punch. Top 3 or 4 quarterback in the conference. And I'll throw this to you. As you look at him compared to the quarterbacks in the rest of the Big Ten, like, who would you take above him?
Yeah, I mean, fantastic question. You know, a lot of these guys we haven't seen yet, right? So, like, you know, the Indiana's new quarterback, I've never watched him play. So for me, it's like I try to be nice in saying top 3 or 4. Try to be a little humble with that comparison. But to me, if we're talking about the best quarterbacks right now, at least the ones with the highest floor to me are Drew Aller and Luke Altmaier. And I'm just going to talk about Luke Altmaier in particular. I don't think he's an elite quarterback. I think he's an elite game manager, and that's okay. You know, that is completely okay in the Brett Bielema offense. He's not someone that, you know, if you don't have weapons around him, that he's going to win you games all by himself. You know, there's other quarterbacks in the country more talented than him in that regard. But Luke is a gamer. And when you do give him some options, you know, he can keep a defense honest with his feet. You know, he's making the right decisions right now. And so for me, it's like Luke can be a huge asset to a team that you know, he's like an Alex Smith type of, you know, in his prime back in the NFL. Like, again, you're never going to consider him a top 10 quarterback in the NFL talent-wise. Nothing about him wows you, except for, you know, he does have pretty good legs under him whenever he can find a hole and, you know, extend a drive just with his legs. But he's just someone who Brett, Barry, and by default me now just kind of trust, and I think that's good enough for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's really helpful, because I think a lot of people will kind of look at the next wave of quarterbacks in the Big Ten. You know, you've got Julian Sand at Ohio State, you have Mendoza at Indiana, you have Dante Moore at Oregon, you have all these different guys that are coming in, you know, Underwood at Michigan. And I think a lot of people look at that and think, oh, like we're going to have these great young quarterbacks. And I would just direct you to a team that you guys beat, Nebraska, who, like, we were all excited, and I think still rightfully so excited about Dylan Raiola. But to be a first-year quarterback, you better have a really good cast around you, and B, you better be able to adjust quickly, because otherwise you have a lot of struggles. And I think you're right. I appreciated your being a senior is like a cheat code.
Oh, yeah.
And we saw that a little bit with Will Howard at Ohio State, where even though he, like, I would argue, does not have all the tools, although I think more than people give him credit for, because of his leadership and his ability to escape pressure, like, he did very well for them. And I think it's really well said about Luke Altmaier. And I think people who don't understand why he's so valuable, they need to understand that about him. It's his leadership, his seniority, and his ability to navigate and manage the game. He's excellent at it.
Yeah. And, you know, again, it's another, like, going into last year, you know, they did ask Brett, you know, what kind of things you want to see, what kind of growth you want to see from Luke. And the consensus was, like, Luke's a very quiet guy. And, you know, he's not exactly that outwardly. Look, the year before we had Tommy DeVito as our starting quarterback.
Yeah.
Right? And Tommy DeVito was, you know, Mr., you know what I'm trying to say. Very, you know, brash and out there. And so Luke was a very quiet guy. And so that was one of the responsibilities that Brett gave Luke. Hey, you need to be a leader in that locker room. And I think that last year, as the season progressed, you kind of saw that happen. He was more in the forefront. You could see him become more and more emotional. And so, you know, I'm really excited to see what he does in his final year of playing college football.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Let me throw a curveball at you, because we talked about Luke and kind of where he stands. Several weeks ago, JR and I had an episode about our coaching rankings. And so we talked a lot about Brett. Where would you put Bielema in the hierarchy of Big Ten coaches right now?
See, that's tough. Okay. I wish I had a list in front of me. I'll put Ryan Day number one, of course. I'm going to put Lanning, Franklin, although I wouldn't mind seeing if Brett Bielema had taken over Penn State. I think Brett could do a very similar job to what Franklin is doing now. So maybe even that's a little arguable. But I think I can say pretty confidently I would put Brett in the top 5, top 6. And again, that's without looking at a list in front of me, just based on what he's done, not just prior, at Wisconsin, a decade ago. But really, even if you take a quick peek at his tenure at Arkansas, he had a very successful first year.
Yeah,
I believe he was like 6-2 or something like that in his second year, and then everything went downhill after that, and they finished the season losing like 4 or 5 straight, and then you lose in that manner in the SEC at Arkansas, where that fan base is rabid. They're calling for your head, and then third year would just happen to be a disaster. But when you combined that first experience with Wisconsin and now where he's got Illinois currently and possibly trending towards, Illinois is not an easy job. And so it's one of those where I think I'm comfortable saying he's top 5, top 6, but off the top of my head, the only ones I can say I would probably for sure have 1 and 2 is Day and Lanning.
This has been so fun. JR and I, this is our top 4.
Sure.
Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, James Franklin, Brett Bielema.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of what I was kind of hinting at too. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think you make a good point that I think you can really, I think you could really ask the question, is Franklin that far ahead of Bielema? And I think Franklin gets a little too much hate because he doesn't beat Ohio State. And it's like, well,
right.
Aside from Michigan, who's actually beat Ohio State
kind of hard
over the past, 15 years. But I think you make a really good point that if Bielema is at Penn State, does he actually do a better job? He's one of the few that I think could with what Franklin's done. So, okay. There you had it. I think top 4 coach. I don't think top 5, top 6. I think top 4. So.
I'll take it again. Yeah. Just, briefly going through the roster of Big Ten coaches. I just think, Brett's he just brings such a high floor with him, and there's, I'm curious to see, where Curt Cignetti goes in the future. Obviously he's had a hot start everywhere he goes, and he had a fantastic inaugural season in the Big Ten Conference. Can he repeat that next year? If he does that again, and then again a third year, then all of a sudden, he's going to be in that conversation too, because Indiana is just as hard, if not a harder job than what Illinois is. And so, if I've got the same grading scale for Brett, I've got to use it for Curt Cignetti too. But right now, it's just I've seen it more with Brett, and there's more history to base it on, which is why I have Brett higher than Curt.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think Curt with 1 year, it was a great season. And Indiana fans are like, what do you mean he's not? He should be number 1. He should be.
I as soon as I got finished saying what I said, I regretted it, because I know the Indiana fans are going to find me, because anytime I mention that, even on my show, Zach, on Locked On Illini, why an Indiana fan is watching Locked On Illini, I don't know. But if I say one bad thing about Indiana, they're in my mentions, they're in the comment sections, and literally I look at it afterwards, I'm like, how did you even know? It's like their ears start buzzing when content creators talking about Indiana and not saying they're the greatest thing in the Big Ten.
It's really true. I think every time on the Big Ten Huddle, if I give any caveat to Indiana maybe not being as good, Zach's a hater. He doesn't like that. It's like, I know most of them are joking. We have a great listenership from Indiana, but yeah, well, and what a great way to kick off the Big Ten season next year with Illinois, Indiana. I think that might be one of my most anticipated games, because I think talking about two teams who are really trying to keep building a reputation and a culture. So it'll be really fun.
I can't wait for that game too. It's a game that I have circled. If you asked a lot of Illinois fans, Illinois would have been the talk of the Big Ten and country had it not been for Indiana, right? And the run that they'd been on. And so secretly, a lot of us wish we had a chance to play Indiana last year and just to kind of settle it on the football field on who the better team was. But, the fact that, like you said, it's going to kickstart the Big Ten season for us next year. I think it's like the 4th game of the season. Really looking forward to that. Just seeing how things go, and seeing Indiana up close. They stole a game from us a couple seasons ago. I remember kickstarting the Big Ten season, and now both programs are in a completely different place in a positive way.
Yeah,
and so I'm really looking forward to that game.
Yeah,
not my mentions after. But that game, absolutely, yeah.
Well, yeah. Who would have thought Illinois, Indiana, maybe a top 25 matchup?
Yeah,
it'll be really fun.
Absolutely
really fun. Well, I'll get you out on this. I think Illinois is becoming a trendy playoff pick, or at least a trendy dark horse pick. What does Illinois need to continue to do to have a playoff run this year?
Keep Luke healthy. There's pretty decent depth at the other positions. Wide receivers is going to be an interesting thing to watch, just because we saw, Pat Bryant and Zachary Franklin, they're both not going to play for the team next year. Two of the main cogs of that offense. But if we're going to be honest and have that discussion, the year before we lost Casey Washington and Isaiah Williams, and the same questions, were mentioned. Like, hey, do they have two guys to replace those two? So the wide receiver room is extremely healthy, and young and green and talented. That was the word I was looking for. One of the most talented rooms that we have. But we're going to need somebody to step up and kind of take on the role, like Pat Bryant did, right? Pat Bryant just slowly every year got better and better, to the point where last year he was like a top 5 wide receiver in the entire conference, if not higher. But I think, with Brett, it's the team itself kind of just needs to stay healthy. As I kind of said earlier in the show, Brett's very good at coaching up these players. But when one of the stars does happen to go down, we aren't Ohio State, right? We aren't Michigan. There's not another 4-star to come in and replace them and not lose any production. So I really think that, it's a very veteran team. Last year, we were one of the youngest teams in the Power 4. So this year, with so much talent coming back, we're actually going to be one of the oldest. So I'm looking forward to that. But just stay healthy and certainly keep Luke Altmaier upright.
Yep. Yeah, that offensive line, bringing back, 4 starters? Running backs coming back. A lot of the defense coming back. I mean, it's...
Jack is coming back. The secondary all coming back. And I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to have one of the top, I would say, 10 to 15 secondaries in the entire country next year, but none of them are household names yet.
Yep. Yeah, it's for people who are thinking, well, Illinois was a nice 1-year story. I think you need to be prepared that it's not a 1-year wonder. Like, this is a team that is being continually built for greater success. And I think, to your point, Brett Bielema knows what it takes to be a team that maybe doesn't recruit the same caliber of athlete, but still be effective. And he did it. He did it against Jim Tressel, and I think even Urban Meyer for an extent at Wisconsin. And now he's back. He knows the Big Ten. He knows this culture, and he's got the Illini on the right track. So, Sonny, as we get you out, remind us again where we can find you.
Absolutely. Locked on Illini. If you're interested in Illini content, again, every single day there's going to be a new piece of content posted. But otherwise, just reach out at the Sonny V on all those social medias, or Locked on Illini on all the social medias. And again, Zach, thank you for inviting me. Every time I watch, you, JR, and Kent, I always know I'm going to get really knowledgeable takes from you and JR, and I'll continue to tune in.
Well, we appreciate your support, and for those of you listening, like, subscribe. We love having you guys as part of our community. And Sonny, we got to do this again.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Take care, everybody.